Fernando Valenzuela emerged on the scene as a Dodger in late 1980, and by the end of April in 1981, the baseball world turned into Fernando Mania. Valenzuela went on a historic stretch and single-handedly grew the number of Dodger fans and baseball fans across the globe in a career that stretched well past his rookie season. So let's look at Valenzuela and Fernando Mania.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
Fernando Valenzuela grew up in a small Mexican town as the youngest of 12 children to parents who were poor farmers, living in a home with dirt and concrete floors as they worked the land with the help of their children. Fernando would tag along with his brothers to play baseball, and going against the older competition would of course help. He was just 16 when he signed his first professional contract, and the following year, as the Mexican Central League was absorbed into the expanded Mexican League, the 18-year-old Valenzuela moved up to the AAA level and would be named the league's Rookie of the Year in 1979, posting a 10-12 record with a 2.49 ERA while striking out 141. And it was during this time that Dodger scout Mike Brito went to one of his games, not to see him, but rather an opposing shortstop. When Valenzuela faced him, he threw 3 straight balls to start the at-bat, then he followed that up by throwing 3 straight strikes. And Brito would say he forgot all about the shortstop. The Dodgers then took a shot on Valenzuela, buying his contract for $120,000. In the summer of 1979, he spent time with the Lodi Dodgers of High A, posting a 1.12 ERA in 24 innings. And something the Dodgers felt he needed was an off-speed pitch. So they had Bobby Castillo, already on the Dodgers, teach Valenzuela how to throw a screwball, and that would be massive. He would be moved up to AA in 1980, and he would lead the Texas League in strikeouts with 162, as he went 13-9 with a 3.1 ERA. And in September of that year, he would complete his goal from the beginning of making it to the majors, as he would be called up to become a member of the Dodgers bullpen. And he was important in that 1 month, as the Dodgers are fighting for a playoff spot with the Houston Astros. In 10 appearances, he would throw 17.2 innings, getting 2 wins and a save in those appearances, as he struck out 16 and gave up 0 runs. The Dodgers would end up losing the tiebreaker game to the Astros, but they still had a lot to be excited about going into 1981. But no one could expect what this year would bring, not only for the Dodgers and Valenzuela, but also for the league as a whole. The Dodgers' number 1 going into 1981 was Jerry Royce, but prior to opening day, Royce was injured, and Bert Hooton was not prepared to go. So Valenzuela leapfrogged both of them to become the opening day starter, and he pitched like he deserved it from the beginning, as he tossed a complete game shutout with 5 strikeouts against the defending NL West champs in the Houston Astros. And this would officially be the start of Fernando Mania. Along with his opening day start, Valenzuela would go on a historic 8-game stretch. He was the winning pitcher in all 8 of those games, and all but one of those games, he threw a complete game, with 5 being complete game shutouts. And over those 8 games, he threw 72 innings and gave up just 4 earned runs. So dating back to the 1980 season, Valenzuela gave up just 4 earned runs over 89.2 innings. Only Bob Gibson's stretch in 1968, where he gave up just 3 earned runs over 103 innings, is better and spans over 80 innings. And Gibson was so dominant that year that mounds had to be lowered in part because of him. And within the span of a month, he was the biggest story in sports. The Dodgers took full advantage of his marketability, selling anything with his name and face on it, and it was paying off. Poster prints for Valenzuela totaled 75,000, 50,000 more posters than were printed for the new Superman movie. Everyone from Dodgers fans to Dodger haters to people within his own community fell in love with him. He wasn't as great in his next 6 starts, easy to say with how high he set the bar, but through June 11th, a day where he pitched 7 innings, giving up 2 against the Cardinals and losing, he had an ERA of 2.45 in 110 innings, starting 14 games with 8 of those being complete games and 5 being shutouts. He also struck out 103 in 110 innings for a K/9 rate of 8.43, and he was huge for the Dodgers, as on June 11th, the Dodgers led the Reds by half a game for the NL West Division lead and the best record in the National League. And that would be important, as June 12th brought the beginning of the 1981 players' strike, a strike that delayed the season for almost 2 months. And when things did come back, MLB decided to have a split season, meaning every team that was in first place at the time of the strike automatically made the playoffs, and they would go up against the division winners in the second half, meaning every team was now 0-0. And the reason many didn't like the system from the start is it gave players on teams already qualified for the playoffs less incentive to make an effort, and it would have an impact on Valenzuela. But before the second half would start, things actually came back with the All-Star Game. The game was played on August 9th, marking just the second time the All-Star Game was played outside of August, and the only time it would be played on a Sunday. And in front of a record 72,000 at Cleveland Stadium, the starting pitcher for the National League was the biggest story of the year in Fernando Valenzuela. He threw just 1 inning, but it was eventful. He gave up singles to Rod Carew and Willie Randolph. Rod Carew would be caught stealing, then he got George Brett and Dave Winfield to ground out. And that was it for him. Not much, but it was historic, as he was just the second rookie to ever start the All-Star Game. And it showcased that even with the long break, there was still Fernando fever, much needed as fans were naturally not thrilled with the strike. The 2-month break also showed the impact on Valenzuela, as he gave up 10 earned runs in 18 innings in his first 3 starts, bringing his ERA to 2.81, but he would settle down in his next starts, giving up just 1 in his next 3 starts, with 2 being complete game shutouts, while the other was a 10-inning, 1-run performance, all 3 at home in front of massive Dodger crowds that were there just for him. And that's an actual fact. There was an increase of 7,500 fans in games that he started, totaling over 48,000 on average. Not only that, there was an increase of 14,000 fans when he pitched on the road compared to other Dodger road games, increasing the amount of fans of a team that already had a big draw in road games. And you can see that Fernando was better at home in his final 5 starts. 3 of those were on the road, and in each, he gave up 4 earned runs, never going past the 7th. Meanwhile, in his 2 home starts, he threw a complete game shutout against the Braves, then he gave up just 1 to the Padres over 8 innings in his final start of 1981 on October 1st, which actually ended in a loss. And that brought his final numbers to a 13-7 record in a league-leading 25 starts, with 11 of those being complete games, and 8 being shutouts, pitching 192.1 innings with a 2.48 ERA with 180 strikeouts while compiling a 4.8 WAR. And in a close vote, that would be enough to top Tim Raines to win Rookie of the Year, and the season became something never seen before or since, as Valenzuela became the first and only pitcher to win Rookie of the Year and Cy Young in the same season, just edging out Tom Seaver in a vote that had 4 deserving winners. But what really made the difference was a league best 192.1 innings that he pitched. To go along with that massive amount, he led in strikeouts, complete game shutouts by a wide margin, along with win probability added. He also finished top 3 in pitching WAR, wins, and K per 9. He also showed why he's considered one of the best hitting pitchers, as he hit .250 with a .543 OPS to win the Silver Slugger. You could easily go many ways for the Cy Young, and things would be different in a full season. But there's no doubt that Valenzuela was the talk of the year, and had the best case for the Cy Young in terms of team impact. And aside from the impact he had on his team that year, his biggest impact was what he did for the game itself. The reason this time became known as Fernando Mania is he became an absolute sensation. Aside from just the fact that he was dominant, he was fun to watch for anyone, with his unique, flamboyant delivery where he twisted his body and looked towards the sky before delivering his pitch. And the biggest long-term impact he had was outside of the United States. The Latino community had always been a part of Los Angeles and had an unfortunate history with the construction of Dodger Stadium, as many were forced out of their homes in Chavez Ravine, causing many Hispanic people in the area to avoid going to Dodger games. But the Latino community in LA and the entire country continued to grow through the decades, and even with the Dodgers becoming the first team to broadcast games in Spanish, the Latino community still wasn't a big part of the Dodgers fan base at that point. Estimates were made that 8% of the Dodger fanbase was Latino at the end of the 70s. But a few years after Valenzuela's rookie season, that number would rise to around 30%. He reached parts of the world that didn't really care about baseball, and turned them into lifelong fans. And of course, mainly in Latin America and his home country. His starts were broadcast in Mexico City, a city with a population twice that of LA, as the number of radio stations broadcasting Dodger games in Mexico went from 3 to 17. As at the height of Fernando Mania, Spanish broadcasts received twice the amount of listeners as Vince Scully called games. And he was perhaps the biggest reason the Dodgers led in attendance by a wide margin in a short season. Obviously, it helps that Dodger Stadium had and still does have the most seats, but still, 11 of his 12 home starts were sellouts, and millions more were joining in just to root for the Dodgers regardless. And the massive hype led them into the playoffs. And as previously mentioned, these playoffs were expanded, putting the Dodgers and the Astros in one of the first 2 ever National League Division Series. And this format called for the first 2 games to be at the second half division winners park, while the last 3 would be at the first half division winners. And Game 1 gave a pitching matchup for the ages, as Nolan Ryan was on the mound against the Cy Young and Rookie of the Year. And both delivered. Things were 0-0 until the 6th, when Tony Scott hit an RBI single. But Steve Garvey would tie things up with a solo home run in the 7th. And that would be the only one either gave up, as Valenzuela would be taken out after the 8th, and Nolan Ryan would end up pitching a complete game, as Alan Ashby would hit a walk-off home run off Dave Stewart in the 9th. And the Astros would hit another walk-off the next night to put the Dodgers 1 loss away from elimination. They would win Game 3 at home, and on short rest, Valenzuela would take the mound with the season on the line. He didn't have to go against Nolan Ryan, but instead went up against Vern Rule, who was dealing, giving up just 2 over 8 on a Pedro Guerrero home run and a Bill Russell single. But Valenzuela was better. He hadn't given up a run through 8, but things got tense in the 9th when the Astros were within 1 after a Tony Scott RBI single with 2 outs. But Valenzuela would get Jose Cruz to pop out to throw yet another complete game and keep the Dodgers season alive. And they advanced to the NLCS the next night after getting to Nolan Ryan, winning 4-0 with a Jerry Roy shutout. They went up against the Expos in the NLCS, who were making their first and only playoff appearance. And after winning Game 1, Valenzuela was on the mound at home, and he didn't really have it. It It wasn't terrible, as he lasted 6 innings, giving up 3 on 7 hits, but there was no stopping Ray Burris that night, as he threw a complete game shutout. Things went to Montreal, and they split the first 2 to set up a decisive Game 5. And once again, Valenzuela was on the mound with the season on the line, and he was up against Ray Burris. And the Expos jumped on him early, as a first-inning Andre Dawson single put them up 1-0, and the rest of the game was similar to the first game of the NLDS. Valenzuela helped himself with an RBI groundout to tie things, and that would be all the scoring through 8 innings. And just like Valenzuela was pulled after the 8th in Game 1 of the NLDS, Ray Burris would be pulled after the 8th here, and that would be a mistake, as with 1 out, Steve Rogers would give up a go-ahead 2-run home run to Rick Monday to put them up 3-1, just like that Game 1. And Valenzuela went out to the mound looking to close things. He got the first 2, but got himself into trouble when he walked Gary Carter and Lance Parrish. And then Tommy Lasorda was forced to come out and take Valenzuela out of the game, 1 out shy of the complete game. And on 1 pitch, Bob Welch got Jerry White to ground out to give the Dodgers their 3rd pennant in 5 years. And in each of those pennant-winning years in 77 and 78, they went up against the Yankees. And this was no different, as they were going again. And also no different, the Dodgers were counting on Valenzuela after losing the first 2 games in New York. Game 3 wasn't an elimination game, but down 2-0, it might as well be. And Valenzuela would be the definition of a workhorse in a game that was anything but smooth sailing. He walked 2 in the first, but got a double play to end it, and Ron Cey would give him a 3-run cushion with a 3-run home run in the bottom half. But the Yankees chipped away, as Valenzuela had a hard time finding the strike zone. They scored 2 in the second, then a Rick Sharon home run will put them up by 1 in the third. And Valenzuela never made it easy for himself, as he didn't have one 1-3 inning through the first 6 innings. He finally got a much-needed 1-2-3 inning in the 7th, as the Dodgers held a 5-4 lead. And despite giving up 2 singles to start the 8th, he got a double play and a pop-out to go to the 9th with a 5-4 lead. And despite throwing 134 pitches through 8, he was back out there. And in the 9th, he got his second 1-2-3 inning, finishing the game with a Lou Piniella strikeout in a game that was anything but easy. But at the end of the day, it was a complete game victory that saved the Dodgers' World Series chances, as Valenzuela proved how mentally tough he was, as despite walking 7, giving up 9 hits, 2 of those home runs, and throwing 149 pitches, he got the job done. When Tommy Lasorda was asked why he kept him in so long, Lasorda said, "Because it was the year of Fernando." And it's easy to look back and see the importance of this performance, as he would not have to pitch again, as the Dodgers win the next 3 to finally top the Yankees, giving a perfect end to a fairy tale season. It was beyond expectations, as no one could have expected Valenzuela to be the Rookie of the Year, Cy Young, and a World Series champ going into 1981. But it all happened as he became an inspiration and a sensation across multiple continents. And with the sensation came a lot of money for the Dodgers, and as agents got involved, disputes naturally came along, and an idea for how to handle it came from another great Dodger left-hander in Sandy Koufax. As he and others used to do, Valenzuela simply did not show up to spring training in the midst of these disputes, going forward with it despite knowing that he would receive tons of criticism. And not only was he risking his reputation amongst fans, Valenzuela became a talking point of a hot-button issue as he risked deportation as he was in the US on a restrictive working visa. But just in time, they agreed to pay Valenzuela $360,000 for the year, a very high amount at the time, especially for someone who played just 1 season. So he already had the same pressures every major leaguer had, and now he was adding the financial pressures to it. And in '82, he was worth the money, as pitching a full season, he threw 285 innings with a 2.87 ERA, winning 19 games and throwing 18 complete games, as he was an All-Star again, and finished tied for 3rd in Cy Young voting. And after '82, he was eligible for arbitration, and he would wind up winning big, as his new salary was $1 million. His agent was able to convince the Dodgers to pay that salary with a 10-minute video that ended with Al Campanis emotionally reminiscing about Walter O'Malley's desire for the Dodgers to sign a star Latino player, a reminder of how important Valenzuela was and why he was deserving of the money. And Valenzuela would be remembered as much more than a 1 or 2 year great, as he was easily one of the best pitchers in the game during the 1980s. He was an All-Star every year from '81 to '86, also winning another Silver Slugger and a Gold Glove. And he was a certified workhorse, never wanting to come out of games, and it showed, as from '82 to '86, he averaged 269 innings a year, pitching 73 complete games in that time, as he had a 3.04 ERA and a 7.2 K per 9. And before the 1986 season, his salary negotiations paid off even more, as he signed a $5.5 million contract over 3 years, the highest ever for a pitcher at the time. And he would prove his worth that year, which would be his second most notable season. He was an All-Star again, and there he made history, as he would strike out 5 consecutive batters, and Don Mattingly, Cal Ripken Jr., Jesse Barfield, Lou Whitaker, and Teddy Aguirre. tying the All-Star Game record set by another left-handed screwball pitcher, Carl Hubble, in 1934. He probably would have ended up with the MVP if the NL didn't lose the game. And he was great in the second half, finishing the year with the most wins at 21, while compiling a 3.14 ERA in 269.1 innings, with an 8.1 K per 9, as he threw an insane 20 complete games, finishing second in Cy Young voting for his fourth top 5 finish in 6 seasons. And the incredible amount of innings and throwing a screwball caught up to him after this season. 1987 would be his worst year to that point, as his ERA was 3.98, and he missed some time on the DL. In 1988 would be worse, as he started just 22 games, missing much of the season with shoulder issues, and because of this, he was not on the postseason roster as the Dodgers won their second World Series of the decade, though Valenzuela did get another ring. He improved some in 89, throwing less innings, and 1990 would be his last hurrah with the Dodgers, and it really came on June 29th. Earlier in the day, the Dodgers watched a former Dodger and Dave Stewart throw a no-hitter against the Blue Jays. Then before their game that night, Fernando said, "You just saw a no-hitter on TV, now you'll see one in person." And he was a man of his word, as after walking Willie McGee in the ninth, he got his former teammate Pedro Guerrero to hit into a double play to throw the 19th no-hitter in Dodgers history, and marked the only time 2 no-hitters were thrown in the same day. And his 11th season with the Dodgers would end up being his last, as just before the season started in 91, the Dodgers released Valenzuela, and with it being so late into spring training, he had a hard time finding a new team, and would end up pitching just 2 games for the Angels that year. He actually ended up pitching in the Mexican League in 92, before returning to the majors in 93, and lasting until 97, pitching for the Orioles, Phillies, Padres, and his final team being the one he threw the no-hitter against in the Cardinals. Valenzuela had a bit of a fallout with the Dodgers as a result of what happened after 1990, but he would return in 2003 to be a part of the Spanish-language broadcast that he went a long way in expanding. And out of respect, the Dodgers kept the number 34 out of circulation for decades until officially retiring his number 34 in 2023, with him and Jim Gilliam being the only non-Hall of Famers to have their numbers retired by the Dodgers. And 4 years prior to that, his number 34 was retired throughout the entire Mexican League, where he got his start, and deservedly so. Obviously, Valenzuela is a Dodgers legend, but he should also be looked at as one of the most impactful players in the history of the game. Very few players in history have made such an impact that they brought tons of fans to the game and made them lifelong fans. It can be summarized with a quote from the Spanish voice of the Dodgers, Jaime Jarrín, who said, "I truly believe that there was no other player in Major League history who created more new fans than Fernando Valenzuela. Sandy Koufax, Don Drysdale, Joe DiMaggio, even Babe Ruth did not. Fernando turned so many people from Mexico, Central America, South America, into fans. He created interest in baseball amongst people who did not care about baseball." Fernando Valenzuela left an impact that still runs deep, and it can be seen from those who still remember Fernando Mania. As Vin Scully said, but in baseball, Fernando was a religious experience. You'd see parents, obviously poor, with the little youngsters by the hand, using him as inspiration. And you can watch my video about the entire strange 1981 season that Valenzuela was a huge part of.